Good morning. My name is Emily Dawn Whitehurst, and I have the honor of serving as President and CEO of the Houston Area Women's Center. Thank you to our friends in the media, to our partners, and to the survivors who are here with us today. I also especially want to thank the community leaders who have gathered today and who have demonstrated leadership and compassion on behalf of those who have suffered violence and abuse. Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner, you don't need to stand up here. You all get to sit on the front row. But if you want to, you're welcome to stand up here. I wanted to be flanked here by our sister providers who are going to introduce themselves in just a minute. Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner, Congresswoman Lizzie Panel Fletcher, Mayor Pro Tem Ellen Cohen, former CEO and champion of survivors. We so thank you for being here. Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg, Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo, and board member, thank you. Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, and I know I speak for everyone in this room when I extend our heartfelt sympathies to the family of Deputy Dhaliwal and your fellow colleagues. Yeah. I also want to recognize the very important people here today who work as a network of agencies to support survivors. I'm going to ask them to come up and say their name and their agency. This is a team effort throughout this region, and we work together and on behalf of those who are suffering from abuse, and I'm proud to stand here alongside them.
There, you never know which end. Hi, I'm Sarah Raleigh with the Montgomery County Women's Center.
Hello, I'm Debbie Edge with the Montgomery County Women's Center.
I'm Judy Cox with Family Time Crisis and Counseling Center.
I'm Vita Goodell with Fort Bend Women's Center in Richmond.
I'm Leanne Fry with Bay Area Turning Point.
Good morning, I'm Rachna Curry with DIA.
Good morning, Olivia Rivers with the Bridge Over Troubled Waters.
Good morning, Maisha Coulter with Aid to Victims of Domestic Abuse, ABDA.
Good morning, Amy Smith with the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council.
So you're going to hear directly from our city leaders, but first I'd like to invite Sylvia Rivas up to hear directly from her incredible story of survival.
Hello. Being a survivor really means being a warrior. I'm here today because I was able to win my war against domestic violence and hope that I can encourage others to do the same. My son's father was missing in action from my son's date of birth until my son turned 5. 3 short months later, after a quick courtship, we moved in with him and the abuse began shortly thereafter. He abused us all, but my son and I got the brunt end of his abuse. He didn't always leave us covered in bruises. He strategically would find ways to hurt or terrorize us without leaving very many marks. He was very calculating and cunning. On more than one occasion, I felt my life was about to end and my children were next. I was assaulted at least 7 times. After knocking me down to the ground and choking me during one of these assaults, he got on top of me, straddled me, and began slowly squeezing his thighs around my ribcage. He squeezed tighter and tighter until my airways were blocked. As I gasped for my last breath, he released me. In each and every assault, I saw the pride he took in his torture. He got off on it. My son and I were both his prey, and my son was used as a tool to further hurt me and terrorize my child. Once, out of anger for me, he dangled our son upside down by his ankles over our second floor railings of our home. It was horrifying and unimaginable as a mother to watch. My nightmare didn't end when I left him. Not only did he obsessively call me a minimum of 30 times a day, but he began to stalk me. However, I was prepared for this, as this is one of the things HOG taught me. They made sure I had a safety plan. My war against domestic violence was not fought alone. No victim, survivor, or warrior has to do it alone. There are organizations such as HOG all around that have the knowledge and resources to help women like me move forward. I was determined to come out of this better and stronger, and I did. I became a force to be reckoned with. I hope my story inspires some change. The criminal justice system definitely needs some help. I was not my son's father's first victim, nor will I be his last. I was his 7th. Out of the six, maybe seven charges that were filed against him through incidents involving me alone, he was convicted of 3. Out of those 3 convictions, one being a 3rd-degree felony, he received a total of maybe 30 days jail time, and that was for failure to appear in court, not because of incidents that involved me. And he received 2 years probation. My life no longer is led by fear. It took me years to move away from that fear, but it was done. In my pursuit of freedom, I conquered several of my dreams. I was able to get a 2-year degree in behavioral science, received a couple of college scholarships, and 1 semester away from earning my bachelor degree in political science, and last but not least, I'm officially a homeowner. I'm a single mother to 2 beautifully made children. I'm a full-time title examiner, I'm a Sunday school teacher, and I aspire to eventually become a court-appointed child advocate and a foster mom. My son, who is now 11, is an honor roll student, masters all the statewide testing, is ranked in the top 3 to 10% of his peers statewide, and is enrolled in accelerated classes, and he knows how to mow the yard. I want to end this by asking all of our elected officials to push hard for these offenders, like my son's father, to be accountable for their actions. And I want to tell our victims, survivors, and warriors like me that you can win this fight, and you don't have to continue fighting it alone. There's so many people and organizations that want to help. You too can be free.
Thank you, Sylvia, for your courage, for your willingness to be a champion for offender accountability, and for the services that every survivor needs and deserves. We really appreciate you. In 2018, 89 people lost their lives to domestic violence here in the Houston area. That's a 38% increase, representing 1 out of 5 homicides. So far this year, we are told that 41 people have died resulting in from domestic violence. We gather today as a show of force to say that these women and men who have been senselessly murdered will not be forgotten. We also gather today as a network of agencies and advocates working with and for the thousands and thousands of women, men, and children who are suffering violence and abuse right now. I think if we totaled the number of clients that we have collectively, it would be both heartbreaking and also really astounding, because we do this work with very little resources. And I want you to know we are saving lives. We stand here with those who are feeling demeaned and degraded, who are feeling violated and trapped, and who need our support and counsel. And we do this every day. And finally, we gather here today because we believe this violence is preventable. We think there should be no more senseless deaths. In fact, we know it. So what is it going to take? First, we've got to prevent the cycle of violence before it starts. We've got to make sure our youth know what boundaries look like, what healthy relationships look like, that they have access to social emotional learning, teen dating violence prevention programs. We all do this work in our own way, and we know that prevention is the answer. Secondly, we know that survivors need services. They need to know that without judgment, without shame, they can call us and they can get counseling and support. They can get housing services. They can get access to anything they might need to make sure they are not financially dependent on the person who is abusing them. That's the work that we do every day, and it saves lives. And lastly, and probably most importantly, if a survivor is calling us and they want out and they feel in danger, they need safety on demand. Please help us make sure that when somebody calls our agencies, they have a place to go. We have people on a hotline right now around the corner answering calls. We're all required to have hotlines, and I can't tell you how hard it is for our frontline advocates to not be able to find a safe place for somebody to go when they want out and when they're scared. So that's why we're here today, because we believe this violence is preventable, because we're dedicated to empowering survivors, and because we want safety on demand. And with that, I would like to invite Mayor Ellen Protem, former CEO, to say a few words and to introduce the mayor. All of these leaders here are doing amazing things to change the tide here in Houston, and I'm really excited for you to hear what they're up to.
Thank you all very much. It's indeed an honor to be here. I was sitting there thinking, when I was asked to serve on the board of the Houston Area Women's Center in 1980, there would not have been 2 people in the room, and certainly no media, because it wasn't a big deal. I mean, if a woman was getting battered, if she was being beat up, she must have done something to deserve it, right? She must have provoked it, had to be. And it was no big deal. And besides, there are a lot of funny jokes we could tell about domestic violence. You know, in the locker room. Let me tell you what I did to the old lady the other night. We've come a long way. In my experience, I have served for 18 years as the CEO of the Houston Area Women's Center. In fact, I was looking at some of the pictures in the back here, and starting here, going down about 9, I served with all those individuals who were chair of the board when I was here. But I also served about 7 years on the board, so I've had about 26 years experience with domestic violence. When I did get involved, it was like turning a battleship. It was really difficult to get that message out, that no one deserved to be battered. There is nothing that anyone does for which they deserve to be hit. The number of victims was mentioned that have been killed in the Houston area. I would add to that that there were 136 deaths in Texas, Mayor, in Texas this last year. I was sort of thinking about that. If you pictured 6 school buses parked in front of this building, and each seat was filled with a body, that would probably be about 136 bodies. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. The other thing I wanted to mention, just because we have the chief here and a number of other law enforcement officers, one of the issues that troubles me a bit is when I hear the media, with all due respect, when I hear the media refer to domestic violence and saying that they have sent a police officer or a sheriff's deputy out to a domestic disturbance. I don't like that word. I don't like domestic disturbance. Sounds like somebody pushed a lamp over by mistake. I think what we need to be able to say, and what the media needs to be able to report, is that they sent someone out to a domestic violence incident, so that it's perfectly clear that what happened is that someone was dramatically hurt. So I'm urging our law enforcement, I'm urging media to change that language from domestic disturbance to domestic violence incident. It's been my pleasure to be involved with the Houston Area Women's Center for 25 or 26 years. And let me tell you, it's also my pleasure now to introduce the mayor of the, I guess I would say the 4th officially, but we know it's the 3rd largest city in the United States. And someone that I've had the pleasure of working with as his mayor pro tem for the last 4 years. And let me assure you, there is no one that is more compassionate, that cares more for the individuals, the citizens of Houston, and particularly those that are disenfranchised or that are survivors of domestic violence. It's absolutely my pleasure to introduce our mayor and my friend, Sylvester Turner.
Let me start off by certainly acknowledging Mayor Pro Tem Ellen Cohen. I know how personal this issue is and passionate that she is on domestic violence. So, and it's been my honor to have sat next to her for 4 years. So, and thank you. And even before then in the legislature, where Ellen fought this battle in the legislature successfully on so many multiple fronts. So thank you for your leadership and continued leadership in this area. Emily, it's good to be with you again. So thank you also for your leadership, for all of these individuals representing the network. And you do need an effective network. So thank each and every one of you. You all on the front line. So thank you for what you do. To all the elected officials, Congresswoman, the DA, Chief of Police, the Sheriff, thank you all. And then Sylvia, thank you. Thank you for just being bold enough and daring enough to tell your story, and then to be a force to be reckoned with. And then I heard you say getting ready to get a degree in political science. And so I see you one day going from over here to over here. So thank you. And thank you for still having your joy and for raising your son. So very much appreciated, and just being victorious in your battle. So look, let me just take a few minutes. We are grateful for the work that all of you have done over the years, and for what others are doing on City Council, and the former head of the Houston Area Women's Center. I certainly want to acknowledge again the President and CEO, Emily Dawn Whitehurst, for leading this powerful organization, and it is a powerful group. And let me just say from the beginning, I endorse all of the objectives that you've outlined, and look forward to working with all of you to fulfill those objectives, especially safety on demand. So we are with you 100%. You and your team speak for victims of domestic and sexual abuse, especially when they cannot speak for themselves. Quite frankly, one death is one too many. One assault is one too many. And it is preventable, but it's not preventable unless we're all willing to stand up, not just speak, but stand up and do something. I'm sorry that I missed the candlelight visual at City Hall last night, and Saturday we were at another visual for Deputy Sandy Dollywall. And over the weekend, I heard a woman being interviewed on TV about the time she was in a terrifying domestic violence situation. And after she called 911, it was Deputy Dollywall who responded. And she recalled that he took great care of her and her child. And so I want to thank all members of law enforcement and volunteers who put themselves on the line to protect the most vulnerable. And whether it's providing a shoulder to cry on, a safe place to stay, counseling, or advocacy, it matters when we support survivors, and it helps them build a life free from the effects of violence. And it takes all of us to become that village that's desperately needed. The Mayor's Task Force Against Gun Violence recommend that we find ways to implement safe surrender in our communities. And my Government Relations Director, Bill Kelly, recently joined the Policy Committee of the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council to discuss the Safe Surrender program currently being piloted out of the 280th Criminal Court District Attorney. We know we must advocate for stronger gun laws and tougher enforcement in domestic violence cases. And I have marched with mothers and students and other gun safety groups that demanded that a person arrested on domestic charges be prohibited from possession of guns. And we must have an Institute a zero policy. We must fight against domestic violence every day, and not just in the month of October, but in every single month. A man, woman, or child who is a domestic violence victim may be less afraid to leave a dangerous partner environment when they have a support system. And all of us in every arena in which we stand must do everything we can to strengthen the safety network. And through awareness, prevention programs, and passing and enforcing tougher laws, we must be that support system. We can save lives, we can make a difference, and we can prevent domestic violence. And it's past time. It can be done anywhere. We can do it here. And quite frankly, we can take people to the moon. We can end some horrible situations that are occurring right here on Earth. And no better time to start than right now. I look forward to working with each and every one of you.
It is my great honor to invite Chief Art Acevedo to share a little bit about your efforts. We are so thankful for our partnership.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Mayor Pro Tem, Congresswoman, DA, Sheriff, and especially our service providers back here that really are heroes. But I also want to recognize our team, the Houston Police Department, that stand in the back, that really are the professionals that try to focus on this very specific crime that we know impacts so many families. And I want to just tell you that our goal, our collective goal, is to turn victims into survivors, to help them show that you can survive domestic violence, domestic abuse. But it starts with knowing and recognizing that you have a team of people with hearts that that are for this type of services to our most vulnerable, which is really women and children, and in some cases men, and in some cases, and in a lot of cases, transgender folks that, quite frankly, and people of the LGBTQ community that over the years have not want to come forward because they don't think that they're either going to be outed if they're closeted, or they don't think they'll be taken seriously, or they don't think we care, or the immigrant community that thinks that we might be more interested in their immigration status rather than bringing them justice and bringing them to safety. And so to this month, we're excited. We have our new pens that last year when we were making the presentation, my lieutenant back there, I said, I really like that, but we need to get pens as a reminder to everyone during the month of October that the Houston Police Department absolutely takes this crime seriously. Two, that we stand ready, prepared to bring people to safety with our partners at the Harris County District Attorney's Office and all these service providers, that we're going to hold and take to account the person that is committing violence. And let me just say, I want to go over some statistics real quick, but violence is not just physical. It can be emotional, it can be psychological, it can be controlling. But those psychological violence, that emotional violence, is the beginning of a journey to physical violence and too often to death. And so it's important for the community to know that, to recognize those signs. Let me just tell you how important this is to us. This year there have been 35 domestic violence homicides, for which 21 were intimate partner deaths that were a direct result of domestic violence. As of between January and September 30th, 2019, 35 family violence homicides, 21 intimate partners, 8 other family relations, 6 child abuse cases involving leading to murders, which is the same level as 2018. To date, we've received 23,927 reports of domestic violence at the Houston Police Department, which is actually a decrease. But let me just tell you all what happened in 2017. We decided with the DA's office to put on some training for our folks. We changed policy in the way that we actually address domestic violence calls, the way we answer domestic violence calls. And we actually got supervisors from the Houston Police Department involved if there was not charges being accepted. And then the DA agreed to get her supervisors involved. And so we opened up the lines of communication. What we saw was a 40% increase in arrests for domestic violence. Because you cannot intervene, you cannot put people on a pathway to safety and a pathway hopefully to changing behavior before it spirals out of control, unless you actually have a tool, and that's the tool that are the charges. And so as a result of that training, which was a 2-hour block and that we provided at the same time, and the change in policy, we've seen that these things have actually been better responded to. We've seen that our officers have done a greater job of bringing people to justice, and we've seen that we've had more families that are being helped. I want to close by saying this to this community. We believe our victims. It's never your fault. We want you to speak out. We want you to step forward. We want you to know that we're prepared to help you navigate the road to a healthy and safe life. We will listen to you. We will believe you. We know better than anyone else the level of danger that domestic violence and domestic abusers pose. We know that ultimately it can lead to your death. We want to help you with our partners create a safe and healthy relationships and a foundation for healthy relationships throughout our city. As a community, we must provide victims with the attention they need to access resources, to achieve safety, and to ensure victims don't go unnoticed or unassisted. Please remember that victims, you will not go through the court system alone. We have increased our police department. We've actually added more victim services counselors with the support of Mayor Turner. We've got all these advocacy groups that will help you go through each step. We have our professionals at our division that handles domestic violence cases that will help you through it. You will not be alone. We encourage you, please do not be silent. Don't remain silent. There is an alternative. There's plenty of help out there, and we are here to help you get through that. lastly, remember that the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-7233. Y para la comunidad en español, acuérdese, tenemos una línea que puede llamar si necesita asistencia y es en español, que es el 800-787-3224. Y a la comunidad hispana y migratoria, queremos que sepan que este mes es el mes contra la violencia doméstica y es importante que nuestras familias sepan que no se dejen que estén abusando de ustedes. El abuso que empieza con abuso psicológico sigue al abuso físico, y si no busca asistencia, muchas personas están muriendo en esta ciudad, en este estado, en este país, a las manos de abusadores. Y es importante que nuestras familias sepan, las mujeres sepan, los niños sepan que aquí estamos para servirlo, estamos para protegerlo, y gracias a los esfuerzos de mi alcalde, el alcalde Turner, tenemos más consejeros en nuestros servicios de víctimas, tenemos más compañeros aquí que puedan ayudarle. Y acuérdese que nosotros no estamos en la inmigración, estamos aquí para buscar justicia para la víctima y llevar al sospechoso a la justicia. Así que este mes estamos orgullosos de tener estas cositas, nuestros uniformes, para que un recuerdo a nuestra comunidad que estamos aquí para las víctimas. Por favor, adelante, que estamos a sus órdenes. And with that, I will yield to the next speaker.
He took my run a show.
Oh, I didn't know.
The mayor wanted me to let you know he had to leave early, but
Next one's lunch? No.
All right. Thank you so much. Sheriff, please come and let us hear all about your incredible work on behalf of survivors. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Emily. Thanks to all the service providers here, to all the elected officials, all the special guests, to law enforcement, to Jacob Philpott, our major over criminal investigations. Thank you for being here. For me, this is a very important issue. It's something that I'm personally very passionate about. We know that October 1st marks the beginning of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And one of the first assignments that I ever had in law enforcement was working in the domestic violence unit in the Houston Police Department. So I learned a great deal about it, and it's an issue, again, that I'm personally very passionate about and wanting to do more now in my role as a police executive. And to me, it's something that needs continuous awareness, and not only a month at a time, but daily. It's something that we see every day. I want to thank heroes such as Sylvia for stepping up and sharing your story. We know that it takes a lot of courage. We know that sometimes conversations with pastors, with coworkers, with family members can only go so far. And we're here to let you know that it's okay to reach out, that there's a lot of different service providers that are there to help. Organizations such as the Houston Area Women's Center that does amazing work. I've been privileged to serve on their board. And we want to let you know, and that's why we raise awareness, is let you know that these resources are there for you. We know that it's difficult sometimes to open that dialogue and to say what you've been going through. We've heard and we've seen where sometimes those bruises are far beyond just what you see externally. There is that emotional and mental abuse that occurs, and that's all part of the abuse that takes place. And so we want to make sure that we're being proactive, engaging our community, and letting them know what's available. At the Harris County Sheriff's Office, we try to be proactive in expanding our response to domestic violence in our community. Last year, I believe last year, we partnered with ABDA and others with the District Attorney's Office on a number of things. One that we're very proud of is launching the pilot program in collaboration with the District Attorney's Office and the courts on the gun surrender program that we're very proud of. It was an early entry into this process here in our county. We've learned from it, and now I'm very excited to see that Mayor Turner, the City of Houston, our partners at the Houston Police Department are looking to join as well to help expand this, because we think it's an important step, not the only step, but it's an important one. And as Mayor Pro Tem Cohen mentioned, we have come a long way in our response to domestic violence, but much work still needs to be done. And so that's one thing we're doing. Another thing that we're doing as well is borrowing on the model, again, from the District Attorney's Office and the Houston Police Department with their DART program. That's a rapid response team that goes to many of these systematic and provide those wraparound services, that direct contact up front, so that the survivor doesn't feel so overwhelmed. We know that it's a very difficult time in their lives. Their world has been turned upside down. We know that children have to go to school. We know that sometimes it's having to navigate finding a safe place, a safe haven. And we know that there's a lot of mixed emotions. And to the general public that may not understand, that's why we're here, is to raise that awareness, is that sometimes we hear that common question, well, they must be okay with it, they're staying in the home. No, people stay for different reasons. We know through the cycle of violence that people stay because they're in love, some stay because they're in fear, others stay because their abuser is their financial provider. There's a number of reasons that people stay, and we need to be aware of that so that we could better see what's going on and we can lend a helping hand. And so we're also launching a similar program as well, and so we're very excited about that, to be partnering with all of you to get that off the ground. And we really want to make it a hub where we could again have that rapid response and help people in real time as they need it, and to provide that support for our deputies. That, again, these are some of the most difficult calls that we get to, and we are trying to. I've been to a number of these scenes, these murder suicides, you know, that occur out there in our community, and they really rip your heart apart, and we got to stop that. The other thing that we're doing is we operate the third largest jail system in the country, and we know that it's important that amongst the menu of different outreach efforts that we have, helping individuals with human trafficking and other things, we're also working closely with the partners up here as well to try to implement our very first battery intervention prevention program as well, because we know, again, through the cycle of violence, that we see and hear the abuse, and then it's, oh, I'm sorry, it won't happen again, I promise. We know it's going to take much more than just failed promises. It's going to take hard work, a lot of intense treatment, and while individuals are in our jail system, while they're there navigating the criminal justice system, let's make sure that we have those opportunities to both help survivors that have fallen into the criminal justice themselves because of the abuse that they have endured, but also that those abusers at least have some level of intervention so that we could be proactive while they're in there. That's the third thing that we're doing as well. And we're very excited to be doing that. And so we want to say that this is a community approach. That's why we're all here together in solidarity, because we must send a message constantly. This is against the law. It's criminal behavior. It won't be tolerated in our city, in our country, and there will be no tolerance for it. And we will pursue this to the fullest extent of the law. And also want to say, and I'll say this in Spanish briefly, but we've got to break down, we've got to make sure that we're continuing to talk to all communities. We have a very international, diverse community, and many times, not to draw stereotypes or generalizations, but I speak from experience here, we've got to tell some of our communities, especially, for example, in Mexico, there's a big issue with gender violence going on over there. Many cases go unreported, are not prosecuted, or not pursued. We've got to say that this is against the law. We've got to stop those concepts of machismo and other things that we see, not only in Latin American community or Spanish-speaking community, but many more. And we've got to lend a voice to that. Brevemente en español, estoy aquí porque hoy lanzamos el mes de dar aviso, más información sobre violencia doméstica. Estamos aquí unidos como líderes comunitarios para decirle a la comunidad que el abuso de violencia doméstica no está permitido en nuestro condado. Estamos trabajando todos juntos para ponerle alto a este problema, porque vemos muchos casos en nuestra comunidad donde violencia doméstica impacta a muchas familias, impacta a toda la comunidad. Por eso estamos aquí unidos con el Houston Area Women's Center, con la Fiscalía O, con el jefe Acevedo, con la vicealcalde Cohen, la congresista Fletcher, también todos que están aquí unidos en una voz para decir que tenemos que poner alto a esto y decir que en las comunidades de habla hispana, cuando uno a veces piensan que el machismo y todo eso es aceptable, no es aceptable, eso está contra la ley, y si van a estar causando violencia a sus familiares, van a ir a cárcel. Entonces, muchas gracias por estar aquí. Thank you.
And it's my distinct privilege to invite Attorney District Attorney Kim Hawk. So please.
I'll get it.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're in the 8th inning. All right, and it's not a tie. So good morning, everyone. I'm Kim Ogg. I'm Harris County DA, and I want to talk to you all about just how violent domestic violence is. There's power in words, and sometimes when they're overused, we sort of lose the reality of it. Domestic violence scenes are violent. Our lawyers just obtained a guilty verdict on Ron Haskell, who drove here from Utah to finish a job that he had started years before, which was to kill his wife. Instead, he killed her entire family. Not every member, but it is the most. It is one of the bloodiest scenes I have, not the bloodiest scene that I have ever witnessed, and it is the first case in which the Harris County District Attorney's Office under my administration has sought the death penalty. So we are in that phase. I won't say any more about it other than to emphasize these are the most important cases we have. Now, domestic violence has been an emerging issue in law and in our culture for the last 3 decades that I've been a lawyer. Animal cruelty, those cases weren't filed in the 80s. I'm not sure it was even against the law. Domestic violence, it was filled with women lawyers. It was considered a woman's job, at least in the practice of prosecution. In terms of defending, they were considered easy cases because you could just get the woman to drop the charges. We have come a long way, and we need a lot of help in our justice system. Public safety is the obligation of our government. That means they've got to fund us. We are the government. We've got to express the priority that violence is in our community by funding. So I want to thank 2 bookends in our society that save lives when it comes to domestic violence. The police, who go out on the scene, who face increased risk with domestic violence cases. We know there is a higher chance that you will be injured or even killed in responding to a domestic violence scene than other types of scenes. And to the domestic violence service providers, that's such not an adequate term. This is the front line. They are serving 4.5 million people in Harris County. 4.5 million people. And you can see none of us, we've got a few young people in here, but we've got to grow our own replacements. We've been at this a long time. Now, lest you think that we're not optimists, because we are. We can save lives. It's a predictable crime, so it's a preventable crime. The work that Chief Acevedo and the sheriff and I have done in terms of trying to close the gap in domestic violence. Let me give you an idea of how that's going. He told you how many thousand reports there were. When I arrived at the job in 2017, we were filing about 9,000, about 10% of our docket domestic violence cases. But with our focus on higher risk offenders, we've increased that number to almost 12,000 cases. That's because of the chief's policy about having a supervisor work with the responding officer and our policies at intake to explain and prioritize to our lawyers, these are murders waiting to happen. We've got to get on this. The work that Sheriff Gonzalez has done in surrendering guns in Harris County, this is Texas. As they joke with us, the guns are issued at birth. But it's this easy access to firearms that I see that make this just a total priority. Now, when it comes to funding, I'm looking to champions like Lizzie Fletcher and Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, a longtime champion of trying to fight domestic violence. We need funding. They need funding through VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, and the bill has been stalled. This is fixable. These are preventable murders. So, at the DA's office, I want to reiterate, we don't get it right every time. We have way too many dismissals. Our system is still not victim-centric enough. There's so much pressure, especially on vulnerable victims in our Latino or Muslim or transgender communities, where there's just a lot of pressure on the victims to drop the charges, whether it's through emotional manipulation or whether it's through real fear of deportation of a relative. We see these issues really standing in our way in terms of making more progress with domestic violence. So our DART team, the Domestic Violence Response Team, we were going to roll it out tomorrow, but instead we're going to be attending the funeral of Deputy Dollywall. This is a tough week. The violence in our community seems to never end. So what I want to do is thank the people who continue to fight the good fight every day. We do make a difference. It is, there is a reward every time we get somebody in court. Yep, I would like to convict them and give them longer sentences. But I will tell you, just dragging them in there after you arrest them and getting their attention, that breaks the cycle, at least for that night. So I am here to commit further that we oppose the violence at in every aspect of our community, but at home, children are impacted. And so we have an additional reason and motivation to work really hard on this problem. So whether it's surrendering guns to the sheriff and expanding that program to the city, which we must do, or whether it's sending out a domestic violence response team with law enforcement to follow right after you're there to provide services on the scene, that goes a long way to encourage victims to stick with it. And then let me thank the victims community, because your voice, we can all talk, and we have for years about this problem, and we've tried to motivate one another and our funders to really put their money where their mouth is. So you can count on this group doing it, but we need the voices of victims. Media listens to them. The public relates to you. You are the face of so many thousands of victims. So thank you for your courage coming out to raise awareness. It seems so benign, raising awareness, but I mean, this is how we try to connect with people still, to get funding, stop the violence, to reduce the risk, and to just thank each other, to say, we know why we're doing this. It's to save lives. We remember why we got into this profession, and we need each other. And so we're here for each other. We're here for the survivors in our community, and we're committed to the very end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you. Congresswoman Fletcher, please come forward. I don't think I've had the privilege of actually meeting you till now. And I know Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee wanted to be here, but she can't. There was maybe a report she could come in by phone, but I'd love for you to at least share with us the work you're doing and the Violence Against Women's Act reauthorization and all the support you've been extending for years on this issue.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you for everyone who's here today and all the incredible work that you do. I'm really privileged to be here in this room of incredible leaders across our community in every way. And I do want to talk a little bit about what we are doing in Congress. But I want to say first that I'm so proud to represent this community and to stand with the leaders that we've heard from this morning who inspire me with their work, with their knowledge, with their incredible commitment to what they're doing, whether it is our law enforcement, whether it's our elected officials, our lawyers who are working hard, and of course the victims advocates and first responders and the victims themselves who are survivors and who are so brave in taking on the challenges that so many of us see, not just here in our community, but across the country. I always tell people in Washington that this community works together to solve problems, and there's no better example than what we see this morning with the collection of people who are here working together every single day to make a difference, a real difference in real people's lives. So today we are here to talk about the first day of Domestic Violence Awareness Month and coming together to solve one of our communities and one of our country's biggest problems, and it's the epidemic of domestic violence. In the early 1990s, I had my first real exposure as I became a volunteer at a domestic abuse shelter, and I learned what everyone in this room already knows, that domestic abuse affects everyone in our community, that it exists in every community, that it exists in every neighborhood here in Houston and across the country. And I am proud that In 1994, the House of Representatives took the first step in addressing this by passing the Violence Against Women Act, otherwise known as VAWA. The bill established protection for all Americans from violence and abuse and worked to ensure that survivors had access to essential services and to justice. Since its passage and its subsequent reauthorization, strengthening the rate of domestic violence has declined by more than 50%. But we know that it still exists far too often in our community. I am proud that the House of Representatives again this year in April reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act, and I do need to take a minute to acknowledge and thank my colleague, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, for her incredible leadership on this issue. She was talking to me about it before I was even in office. She talked to our colleagues in the House about it, and she was a driving force behind getting this bill reauthorized. She's been a tremendous leader on this, and I'm so grateful to be able to work with her on this. And the reauthorized VAWA does several things. It increases the funding. It increases access to justice for people who were not previously covered under the original Violence Against Women Act. It provides additional tools for law enforcement and additional options for housing and other critical needs that we know exist. And so I'm proud of the bill that we passed in April. That bill, like many others, is sitting now in the Senate. And I hope that this October, it will be time for the Senate to take it up, because we know it's past time for the reauthorization to go forward. The Senate needs to vote on this bill to make sure that we are protecting the most vulnerable people in our communities from stalking, from verbal and physical abuse, from sexual abuse in a relationship, and that tool is in front of them. So, as we begin this month, I am optimistic that the Senate will take up this bill that the House worked so hard to craft. And I remain proud to be a part of this community that is really leading on this issue. I always say that our community should serve as an example to those around the country. And on this, with the incredible collection of people here who are working together to make a difference on this issue, I'm incredibly proud to represent this community, and I will always partner with everyone here to make sure that we are continuing to lead on this issue. I'm grateful for your leadership, and I'm here ready to work with you. Thank you so much.
I think at this point we'd like to open it up for any questions. Are there any questions? I'm sorry, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee is on the phone. I think she's just gonna, she is so good for giving us like the final, get with it. So let's see if we can hear her quickly, and then we'll open it up for questions. Okay. Congresswoman, are you ready? We're waiting on you.
Very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you for your courtesy. Thank you for your courtesies. What a historic moment to be at the Houston Area Women's Center, one that I had the privilege of serving there for many, many years as a board member, but to be amongst all of the advocacy groups. And thank you to the structure of the Houston Area Women's Center, Emily and everyone else, for the great leadership that has been given. Thank you to our district attorney, our sheriff, our chief, and thank you so very much, Lizzie, for the great leadership that you have given in the United States Congress. It was my privilege to write this legislation to renew and reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. And in this month that we acknowledge domestic violence as still a scourge in our country, I couldn't think of a better way for us to come together to do two things: save lives and restore lives, and to see the Violence Against Women Act passed, and to give a message to Majority Leader McConnell that we cannot wait any longer. So I encourage us to be active